Fáilte, hello, good evening. Oh, try not to do that. Good evening, Fáilte. Gach duine go léir. Hello, everybody. Ar fud an down. Around the world, you're welcome along to the Library of Mythical Ireland. I'm Anthony Murphy. This is episode 73, Seachtain 3 of Live Irish Myths Tonight. We're doing the second part of the Mythical Ireland Library tour. The first part having been a good long time ago, actually episode 29. So 44 episodes ago. Good evening to everybody. Hope you're all keeping safe and well on this Saturday evening. It's evening here in Ireland. It's actually raining again. It's dull and it's raining. It's more like how Ireland is typically and much less how it has been lately. Since the lockdown began in March, the weather has been mostly warm and sunny and dry, which is incredible. On YouTube tonight, the first of the arrivers is Erica Rivertree Banachty. Erica Fáilte. Also watching on YouTube are Amber Lynn, who says hello to everyone. My garden released me early for once. Good to hear, Amber. Daisy Peter says, Fáilte, have a beautiful Saturday afternoon / evening. Blessings from me and from Rio de Janeiro. Always a pleasure to have you on board, Daisy. Merritt Braun says, good evening. Greetings from rainy Switzerland. Looks like we're going to be sharing that weather theme with a few people, I'd say. Mandy McCurl says, hello, everyone. Glad to be here. We're glad to have you here, Mandy. And she says the wind has calmed down now. Phew. Yes, also here. Archaeoastronomy Database, whose name I forget, and I know you told me, and I apologize, is also watching on YouTube. Anyone else? Jackie Stevenson says, hello, Anthony and the MythFlix too. I have internet finally. Yay. Fáilte. Giagrich, Jackie. And on Facebook, the usual mad crowd. I mean, mad in terms of size. Barbara Barney is the first of the helloers tonight. Fáilte. Giagrich. Lorna Evers Monaghan says hello. Hello, Lorna. Nick Eska Casterton says hello. Anthony and the amazing Tua. Todd Despera says hello, Anthony and Tua. Fáilte. Gach duine go léir. Aaron Durrett is watching. Kristen Gray Taggart says hello from Kristen Ann Scott in Northern California. Gia Reeve. Time for our to be read lists to expand. Oh, yes. Jim Conway is on again. Hello, Jim. Fáilte. Ralph Waldron. Tronona Gach duine go léir. You're very welcome, Ralph. Diane Stevenson says, evening all, Tronona. Monica Muggy Erstad says, love from Denmark. Raw more Ort, Monica. Jules' cousin says, hello. Giagrich. Karen Smith says, hello from Cumbria. Fáilte, Karen. Barbara Kling says, hello, Anthony and everyone. Gorgeous day here in Vermont. Hope you're all doing well. Banachty, Barbara. Margaret Ring is watching. Fáilte, Margaret. Come to talk to. Long time no talk. Carol Barrett says, Giagrich. Good evening, Carol. Kathy Maydeo says, happy Saturday, Mr. Anthony and all the Tua. Cloudy day in Newcastle, Washington State, USA. Great to have the Washington Staters in the house and also the Princeton, New Jerseyers. That's Mike and Jeanette Naylor. Good evening to you both. Megan Walter says, greetings, Tua. Alwyn Roy Badziak. Hi, Anthony and Tua. Calm now after a blustery day in Berkshire. I'm glad to hear that it's calmed down. Nikki Hart says, hi, Anthony, and hello to all of the group. Fáilte, Nikki. Sue Turner says, hello, Giagrich. Nana Haruni says, hello from Armenia. Fáilte. Good evening, Nana. You're very welcome along. Margaret says, good evening, Anthony, and all the lovely Tua. Oh, that is not a good idea. I do apologize. Momentary interruption to service. I hadn't tightened the tripod properly, which I will now do. I have to make sure that it's high enough so that when I stand up there against the bookshelves that you can still see me. Anyway, all is well. Momentary interruption to service. Tom Breslin says, hello from a rainy New York. There you go. It's raining on both sides of the Atlantic. Fáilte, Tom. Long Team NOC says, greetings, fellow Tua. The tea is on the draw. A box of fresh dates are on the go and ready for the tour of Anthony's shelves. Brilliant. John Roach, when the Dogda played his magical harp, Uthma, do we know... Oh, I'm not even reading that, John. No. Tia, you make one slip up and then it's held against you for ages afterwards. Tia Marie Grady Massey says hello from Dallas, Texas. Fáilte, Tia, Fáilte. Aaron Durrett says greetings to Anthony and the Tua. I've been working on a song for you. We'll be ready for prime time soon. Got my paper and pen in hand for notes on the book, Our Secret from the Hubby. Brilliant. I'm looking forward to your song, Aaron. Todd Desper says it's sunny and 80 degrees. Well, at least it's sunny and 80 degrees somewhere. Emily Brennan says, Giagrich from Little Brittany. Fáilte, Emily. Francis Smith says, hi all. And of course, that's from Bollish Slania, Slane in County Meath. Steve Martinson, how you, Anthony? And the MythFlix clan, may blessings to all. Banachti Ort. Doris O'Hara says, hello, everyone. Rainy today in Heidelberg. Fáilte. Doris. Mariana Dunn says, happy Saturday, dear Anthony and Tua from Virginia. Hi, Mariana. Welcome. Yvette Tillema says, hello from the hot and sunny Adirondacks. I don't know. I've never heard of those. They're mountains, aren't they, Yvette? Yeah, there you go. Lucy Boyer says hello from Wisconsin. Fáilte, Lucy. Rowan Grove is in the house in sunny Colorado. More work in the garden. Fabulous stuff, Rowan. Pat Rowan is watching. Fáilte, Pat. Tom King says, evening, Anthony and fellow to it. Rain between the showers today. It will do a power of good. Well, the ground certainly needs it, and the grass growth is a little bit less than it would be at this time of year. Carla Turner says a storm is brewing in Illinois. Well, get yourself nice and comfortable for live Irish myths, or MythFlix as we call it. Alessandro Citarella says hello from Naples. Ciao, Alessandro. Welcome. Dean T. May blessings. Rian Bowes. Hello, Dean. Debbie Daly says good evening, Anthony, and wonderful tour from sunny California. Giagich. Adina Sparks said good afternoon, Anthony, and all. Nice warm day here in New Mexico. Fáilte, Edina. Guido Bruce is watching. Hello, Guido. Lorna Evers Monaghan, I think we said hello to, but just in case we didn't, hello again. Guido Bruce says, greetings from cloudy Netherlands. Well, at least it's not raining. Good evening to you. Marta Lopez Garcia says, hello, hi from Spain, and hello to all our friends in España. Kathy Maydeo says, whoops. Scott Gracie says, Law, Ma, Anthony, Antua, Faye, me, the missus, and baby Iona. Brilliant stuff. 3 of you watching. That's doubled the numbers instantly. I hope you're all having a good time and you're safe and well. Kristen Murray Andre says hello from the Chicago area. Busy week and lots of catching up to do. But it would be great to be with you all today. Brilliant stuff, Kristen. Glad to have you along. Lloyd Stillwell says hello from the perfect weather in Missouri. It's great to know that somebody has the perfect weather, Lloyd, and you're enjoying yourself. Julianne Osborne is watching. Fáilte. Karim Gogus is watching. Giagich, Karim. Susan Scott says, hi, Anthony, and all. Taking a break in the studio. It's rainy here in Connecticut, but a perfect afternoon for listening to stories. Yes, indeed. Hello, dear friends, and Super Anthony, says Karim. Grace Walker says hello from Long Island, New York. A strong rain here. Glad to gather. We're glad to have you. Melanie Corpy says hello from Georgia, USA. Fantastic. Margaret Ring says 115 viewers, and it's at 130 now. Wow. Nice to have you all along anyway. Henry Paddy Shearman is in the house, says good evening to her, and good evening, Anthony. Trinonoa, Henry. Zuan Mai Kim says something that I can't pronounce. I don't think it's Irish, but I'm presuming it's a hello of some kind. And if it is, hello right back to you. You're welcome. Paula Snow Queen says wavy hand. Giagich. Beth Amos says evening all from Abruzzo in Italy. Ciao, Beth, and welcome. Charlene McLean Cosby says evening from Charlene in North Carolina. Brilliant. Erin Kinsey says it's 92 degrees in Florida. Sounds hot. Lovely stuff. Fiona Nagyolarua says cloudy blue skies, but has finally stopped raining here in sunny Alberta. Brilliant. Thalia Brown says it's still windy in Glastonbury. Yes, indeed. We share a lot of the same weather a lot of the time, Thalia, don't we? Welcome along. Hope you're feeling well. Patricia McAteer is watching. Fáilte. Patricia Donna. Jean Porter says hi. Giagich. Matthew Bessel says Sláinte from Gay Kelts. Paumanok. Fáilte, Matthew. And on YouTube, the Woodsies from Monaster Boyce are in. Presuming it's raining in Monaster Boyce too. The rain is a bit higher there. You get it a bit sooner than we do because you're a little bit higher. Amber Lynn, higher in altitude, that is, in case anyone's asking. Amber Lynn says, lol, I have always wanted to make an internet trip. John Main says, Banathy, oh, San Francisco, Greenvar. It's sunny in San Francisco. You're wearing flowers in your hair. Melanie Lynn is watching. Giagich, Melanie. William Fitzgerald says, greetings from County Cork, and indeed greetings right back to you, William. Banachty. So what's going to happen this evening, hopefully, is I'm going to be kept fit and well because I'm going to be making several trips back there and back to the chair again, like before. So last time we dealt with those 3 shelves there. These are kind of odds and ends that we might do in a third episode whenever we get round to it. Tonight, I'm dealing with definitely those 2 and possibly the third shelf there. So we're going to do our second tour of the mythical. And I know you probably don't think that's much, but you'll be surprised how quickly the time will go by if we're talking about each and every one of the books. Nora Gaffney O'Connor says, evening on Tua August Anthony. Feels like autumn out there. Brrr. Sea was cold, but so clear. I take it you swim every day, Nora. Fantastic stuff. And yes, it is very autumnal today, but we've been very lucky during the lockdown to have nice weather. Martin Rain Holtz says, hi from Norway. Trenonawa, Martin Giogrich. Maeve Fiona Callahan says, Trenonawa, Anthony. Just want to say, what a kind and generous soul you are. You've created such a welcoming and inclusive space here. We're lucky to have you as a guide on this mythical journey, and Margaret too. That's very nice of you to say so, Maeve. Thank you indeed. Glad you're enjoying yourself. That's the main thing, you know? The fact that people feel comfortable and there's no trolling and there's no, there's no rows. That's the main thing. Karen Hart says it's lovely in Pittsburgh. There you go. All the way over there in Pennswood, otherwise known as Pennsylvania. Karen, it's lovely to see you. Patricia McAteer says, hello all, cold mizzly in Omeath. Yes, mizzly, mist and drizzly. Indeed, indeed, indeed. I hope you have the fire lit. Louise Sherrill says, hello, Giogrich. Louise. Elizabeth Doyle says, hello from winterish Killarney. Yes, indeed. It's winterish all over our lovely Isle of Arran this evening. And of course, the grass will be a little bit greener as a result. Margaret Kiernan says, Fáilte, Anthony and Tua, Fáilte, Tusa Féin, Margaret, Conastatu, Dean T. Love that pink purple t-shirt, Tony. Yeah, it's my kind of colour. I've been wearing a lot of darks lately, It's about time I brightened up. John McCarthy says, hi from Summerhill. Fáilte, John. Is that Summerhill in County Meath? Melanie Lynn says, hello, Anthony, and the Tua. Great to see you, Melanie. Donna Shukaitis Nugent says, hello from Ohio. Giogrich, Donna. Hope you're well. John McCarthy is calling in his friend. Kimberly Field Sipala. Hello, lovely people. Sunny in Washington today. Thaw on Green Ag Totna Venue. Brilliant stuff. Margaret Kiernan says she also loves the shirt. Well, there you go. Movanwe Millward says, Trenonawa, Anthony on the Tua de MythFlix. Pretty dangerous episode tonight in terms of book buying. Looking forward to it, though. And John McCarthy says, yes, that is Summerhill and County Meath. Right, what are we on? We're on, let's call it 12:30. Okay, skip the introductions, YouTubers, if you want. It's a big part of the whole deal for all of it. Tua de MythFlix. So tonight, part 2 of the tour, beginning top left. Now, I will ignore one or two of the books because they may not be entirely relevant. So if you see me passing over, I'm not going to mention every single one of them. I'm going to pick out those that are a little bit more relevant and those that I think you'll be interested in. By the way, Elaine Brown Hughes is watching. Elaine, I'm pretty sure you haven't been on here before. Fáilte, you're very welcome. Pull up a stool, grab a brew or something stronger, a dram if you wish. Imagine yourself sitting by a crackling fire in a big hearth, and you're in a welcoming house full of nice people, and enjoy the stories. Now, this is an interesting one. I haven't read this one, and perhaps some of you will have been familiar with the work of Caitlin Matthews. I'm sure any of you who are interested in sort of Celtic mythology and spirituality will have encountered this name. I haven't read it. The very first book I pull off the shelf tonight is one that I haven't yet read, and I cannot comment on. The mysterious inner world of the Celts continues to intrigue and delight us. The myths and legends of the Celtic tradition contain much that is relevant to our contemporary world and from which we can draw great inspiration. The Way of the Celtic Tradition is a comprehensive introductory guide to the Celtic tradition and explains where the Celts came from, who the Celtic gods, goddesses, and heroes were, why we still celebrate the Celtic festivals, how we can understand the magical and mystical tradition of the Celts. Caitlin Matthews is a respected initiator in the fields of Celtic spirituality, shamanism, and the Western mysteries. There you go. First book tonight, haven't read it. Second book tonight, I know that you're all going to enjoy because you have spoken, those of you who have spoken about him, have spoken very, very, very highly about Eddie Lenihan. And it is Meeting the Other Crowd, the Fairy Stories of Hidden Ireland. And all of these covers will be back to front for the Facebook viewers. There is no mirroring option on the Android phones, unfortunately. However, the YouTube version, which appears to be back to front to me, I know when it comes up as a video, will be the right way around. So I know that some of you are very fond of Eddie Lenihan's work. And this is a fairly recent publication, if I'm not mistaken. Or maybe a reprint of an old publication. I'll find out exactly now and try to give you the details. Oh, yes. Copyright Eddie Lenihan and Carolyn Eve Green, 2003. So I apologize. This isn't actually a new publication, but a very comprehensive one by the looks of it. And one that I've dipped in and out of, over 300 pages. Now, the next one is one that you're all unlikely to have, to be quite honest with you. And that is because it is probably a not widely available reprint. Actually, it's not even a reprint. There's a lovely story behind this. The book is Legends and Stories of the Boyne Side. And hopefully you will recognize this name by Francis Ledwidge. Francis Ledwidge was a poet who lived in Slane in County Meath, just down the Boyne Valley from us here. And he had a series of articles, essays, chapters of this book were published as articles in the Drogheda Independent newspaper in the early part of the 1900s. Ledwidge went to war in the Great War with the British Army, and unfortunately was killed in the war and was unable to complete the series. The plates for this were rescued from a skip, believe it or not, at a time when there was significant renovation work taking place at the offices of the Drogheda Independent. I actually used to work there. It's where I worked at the beginning of my career for 10 years. And it was put together by XL Printing, and that's Boyne House, Churchill, Navan, County Meath. And so most of it is exactly as it was published in the newspaper, but the last a number of pages are a modern typeset version because the originals had been damaged. So there you go, rescued, never published in book form until 2017. There you go. So a wonderful story behind it. That basically the plates or the typesetting had been done for a book based on the articles that were in the paper. And there's a photo of the original book, which was saved from destruction. So that's an unusual one. That is not, I don't think, and I don't want to, xlprint.ie, excelprint.ie, in case any of you are interested in perhaps obtaining a version of it. I don't think it's widely available in the bookshops. Okay, so I'll bring a few over. Save me getting up so regularly. This is an interesting choice. The Celtic place names of Scotland. And I think it's a reprint of an older book. Let me just tell you if I can find it. This edition, published in 2004, originally published by W.J. Watson in 1926. And the reason it's interesting is because there are actually so many crossovers between Old Scottish Gaelic and Irish Gaeilge, and there are so many crossovers with place names that it is actually a useful thing to study the names and some of the traditions of Scottish place names. And of course, some of the myths are the same. Diarmid, for instance, and also Fionn McCool, who is found widely, or the myths or the legends of whom are found widely in Scotland. Hang on, I just need to... Whoops. I forgot to plug in my charger. Next on the list is The Archaeology of Ireland by Robert McAllister. And That's Bracken Books, London. First published in 1928 by Mcgowan and Company Limited. This edition published 1996 by Bracken Books. I have quite a lot of books that are either facsimile reprints or reissued versions of old books. And some of these are very, very valuable. Now, if I'm not mistaken, Robert McAllister, trying to remember, he has Robert A.S. McAllister, 1949. I think he was. Is he the same as R.A.S. McAllister, or is he his son? I think he's his son. And I mean, that's a useful book. There's, look, a sketch plan of the passages and chambers of Doubt, which you will possibly familiar with as something I've been speaking about on a number of occasions. Sorry, I'm missing the latest comments. It's an interesting one, and of course, interesting to read too how much of a progression has been made in terms of the pushing back of the dates of the great monuments, and of course the introduction in modern times of carbon dating technology, etc. This one is a nice collection. It's Celtic Threads, which is edited by Padraig Clancy, exploring the wisdom of our heritage. And there are contributions from Mary Condren, whose work we read in relation to St. Brigid. And Mary Condren is a fabulous scholar. Celtic Spirituality, a holy embrace of spirit and nature, and that's by Dolores Whelan. And of course, Dolores, a longtime friend of mine, who's based in Ravensdale near Dundalk, at the foot of the Cooley Mountains. Column Kill a Man for All Seasons, John O'Riordan. Brigid Murren Nail, the eternal feminine of the Celtic tradition, that's by Padraig Clancy. The Bible, the Desert, and the Celtic Tradition by Marcus Lossack. The Cult of the Dead in Early Irish Celtic Spirituality by Sean O'Dynn, and that's on Tahar Sean O'Dynn, the late great Sean O'Dynn of Glenstall Abbey. Celtic Prayer by Diarmuid O'Leary. Celtic Myths in Healing Process, A Journey with Cuchulainn to the Warrior of Heart by Kate Fitzpatrick. Celtic Resources for a Peace Process, Johnston McMaster. Creative Workshop in the Celtic Tradition, Dara Molloy. Digging for Sound in the Celtic Tradition, Noreen Nirean. The Blackbird and the Bell, Reflections on the Celtic Tradition, and that's John Moriarty, the late, great John Moriarty. And of course, John Moriarty has crossed over to the other side since this. This was published in, was it 99? Yes, 1999. Glendalough, A Valley of Dreams, Michael Rogers. Kildare Today, continuing with the Brigidine tradition, Mary Minahan. Celtic Holiness and Modern Eco-Warriors by Nuala Ahern. And The Shiel Retreat, a Celtic celebration in an Ignatian setting, Fionnuala Nichul. Ireland in the late 20th century, seeking a new turning towards matters Celtic, including a marked interest in Celtic spirituality. The book is a collection of essays on that subject. Drawing from the pre-Christian and Christian Celtic story, the collection moves through the wonders and the darkness of the Celtic tradition. It asks, is Celtic spirituality soul food or junk food? How can it be of value today? Why is the archetype of war predominant in the Irish psyche? What about the quality of mercy? How can Celtic spirituality contribute to the process of peace? And I have read some of it, and I found it really, really quite enthralling. And there'll be articles in that have chapters in that I'd be much more interested in than chapters in which I'd be less interested. But you know the way it goes. I presume everybody's the same. The next book we have mentioned in at least a few episodes is, in my opinion, a really masterful bringing together of scholarly study in a book that it has been written and produced in such a way as to appeal to a wide base. It's written in a scholarly way, but it's not just for scholars. It's very much a book that you could say is for mainstream, and it is Rhys and Rhys's Celtic Heritage. This book is referenced in quite a lot of scholarly works, papers, and books pertaining to Irish mythology. Alwyn Rhys and Brinley Rhys, Ancient Tradition in Ireland and Wales is the subtitle. Celtic Heritage, originally published 1961, and this is a 1989 reprint, and that's Thames and Hudson. And I suspect I will do a little bit of more dipping in and out of that in relation to our future episodes. I read a little bit of this in relation to Uisneach being the centre during our Uisneach episode, which I believe was around episode 54 or something, around the time of Bealtaine, the week or the day after Bealtaine. Yes, episode 55, Uisneach, Sacred Centre of Ireland. Okay, I'm not taking everything out because I just want to be conscious of the fact that it does kind of tend to time skips on. This is an excellent old book, Antiquities of the Irish Countryside by Sean P. O'Riordan. And Sean P. O'Riordan was the head archaeologist attached to University College Cork. And this was published first in 1942. And there are several reprints and reissuings, and this is the 1965 reissuing. One of the things that I really liked about this is that he published photos of Fornox after its excavation, but before the roof, the modern concrete roof had been put on it. Hang on, I'm just going to try and... Of course, as soon as you try to find something, that's when you can't find it. There we go. So there's a photograph of what Fornox looks like without its roof. So this is Fornox post-excavation, after all the excavation had been done. And Margaret Ring says he excavated Grange stone circle. So there you go. Wasn't he the co-author on the old Newgrange book? Yes, Sean P. O'Riordan and Glyn Daniel. But he died before the completion of that, unfortunately. But again, an interesting... work, and you could probably pick that up secondhand on the internet without spending a fortune on it. Next are subjects that so there's a diverse range of subjects covered in the library. So it doesn't all pertain to mythology, and it doesn't all pertain to archaeology and Irish history and astronomy. So, for instance, here are two works that some of you will be familiar with: On Life After Death by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and Death, the Final Stage of Growth by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. And those of you who have read my book, Newgrange Monument to Immortality, will know that this is a theme that I explored in that book, and the idea that the near-death experience might have informed some aspects of the design of Newgrange. And that it is possible that there were people in prehistory who had, as it were, died and come back to life, or died and been resuscitated some way, maybe hit their head and lost consciousness, and you know, I don't know. It's less incidences of resuscitation, of course, are largely confined to the modern era because you know, of our modern hospitals and medical intervention and technology. A book that I've only sort of dipped into, which again is a reprint of an old book. I can't find the original date of publication. First published 1993 and reprinted several times. Okay, and it is called Mysticism, The Nature and Development of Spiritual Consciousness by Evelyn Underhill. And that is actually, looks to be a very comprehensive work, over 500 pages. And again, because it touches on themes, you know, that we would be interested in. Spirituality is a big, you cannot, in my opinion, explore Irish history, but in particular, well, you know, from the time of Christianity onwards, certainly, but you can't study Irish prehistory and the old monuments without taking into account the spirituality of same. Derek Smith is watching. Fáilte Derek, Conas Atá too. Chasing the Sun, the epic story of the star that gives us life, and that's by Richard Cohen. On every single page, there is something utterly fascinating. It's a vast and all-encompassing delight. Indeed, it runs to almost 700 pages. The sun is everywhere. I'll hold it up while I'm reading the back of it. The sun is everywhere in mythology, language, religion, sciences, art, literature, and medicine. In the grand tradition of the scholar-adventurer, Richard Cohen takes us around the world, illuminating our relationship with the star that gives us life. He reports from locations in 18 different countries, including the coldest place on Earth, the sunniest, and the crest of Mount Fuji, where entirely alone he welcomes the sunrise on the longest day of the year. And of course, there are chapters about the first astronomers, terrors of the sky, celebrating the seasons, etc., etc. A study of how early man, substitute man for human beings, including women, looked at the sun and studied it and all the rest. Now, the next is a series of books that have been published, and I believe there are more in the series, and I have to get my hands on them. And they are the Folktales series. So I have Meath Folktales, and I have Cork Folktales, and I have Waterford Folktales. And I'm not sure if there's one being printed for every county. I'm ashamed to say that I don't have Cavan Folktales, which I believe was written, or part written at least, by my good friend Geroge. And I'm very sorry, Geroge, that I haven't gotten around to getting my hands on a copy. The Meath one, I was very, very interested in, of course, because it's very close to me here, and a lot of the stories I'd be familiar with, or I was surprised to find sort of different versions of them in here. So, for instance, there's a story about a fort near Rossnaree, where which has a legend attached to it that is very similar to the legend of Garrett's Fort near Ardee, which is that there's an enchanted sleeping army underneath it, and that this somebody has to go in and rouse the sleeping army, but that on several occasions when somebody tried to do that, they ran in terror when the sleeping army was roused. There's a chapter about the Black Pig's Dyke, which I was very interested in, and some of the material, I'm not sure how much of it, but some of it is drawn from the Folklore Commission archives. Now, I'm not talking about the school's folklore. In fact, I'm talking about the other collections. So there were sort of adult collectors, as it were, who went around the countryside collecting folklore and legends, etc., etc. And some of this is drawn from that. The Meath one was written by Richard Marsh. The price on that at the time I bought it, which is 6 years ago, was €12.99. The Cork Folktales was written by Kate Corkery, and again, that was €13. Warriors, kings, lakes and hills, great gods and goddesses along the coast, women, caves and deep sea caverns. All sounds very interesting. Waterford Folktales was written by Anne Farrell, and there's no price tag on the back of it, but I assume they're all selling for roughly the same price. Not sure exactly how many more there are in the series, but hopefully I can add to that collection as I go. They're actually lovely little books, very nice to have, and not expensive. I have books about classical mythology. I have quite a few about world mythology and classical mythology. I'm not going to bring them out today. Also there I have Charles Darwin's Origin of Species and The Voyage of the Beagle. I have some one or two books about Freud, but as you probably all know, I have a fairly substantial Jung collection, which I may be able to deal with in an episode. In the meantime, I wanted to kind of move on a little bit. There is one of my, because I believe I have two or three of them, one of my Kinsella translations of Táin Bó Cúailnge. And of course, if you have any interest in Irish mythology at all, it would be very difficult for you to have any knowledge of Irish mythology and to not have encountered Toynbee Cunha in your travels. And some people are sharing the links to the books where you can buy them, and that's brilliant. So thank you for that, Movanwe. I'm not sure if you're the only one, but brilliant. And so Kinsella, Thomas Kinsella's would be one of the popular translations. And look, these things are a dime a dozen. And the thing is, it's such a valuable work. And yet you can pick them up secondhand. I've picked up copies of this secondhand in my local secondhand bookshop for €1, you know, and it is priceless. But Kinsella is very enjoyable. And of course, this has the paintings of Louis Le Brocquoy in it, the fabulous monochrome ink paintings of Louis Le Brocquoy to illustrate the various scenes, the heads on the forked pole and all that. Oh, that is a brilliant idea. Scott Gracie, do a topic on the Black Pigs Dyke. Would be my great pleasure to do so. Not sure if I had that on the list. Yeah, I definitely think that's a brilliant suggestion. And it's something I'm really interested in, actually. Black Pigs Dyke, and that's Scott Gracie. Thank you for the suggestion. Glad I saw that. I'm not going to see a huge number of comments tonight as I'm getting up and down all the time. No library too should be complete without the work of John O'Donoghue, Anam Cara, Spiritual Wisdom from the Celtic World, and Eternal Echoes, Exploring Our Hunger to Belong. John O'Donoghue was a priest, a former priest who left the priesthood, and I think he became a little bit disillusioned with who could blame him for the scandals that had rocked the church, particularly the child abuse and sex scandals. And he was a real beautiful, gentle soul. This is more sort of, if you've not encountered O'Donoghue's work, it is less about Celtic and Irish mythology per se. It's more of a sort of a popularization of aspects of the spirituality of the Celtic world, and drawn, of course, from the Christian tradition as well. I suppose you could call O'Donoghue sort of like a modern poet in a way, someone with a very sort of lyrical voice. But anyway, sadly, John O'Donoghue passed away at a very young age. I think he died of a heart attack, and I don't think he was even 50, or I could be mistaken. Maybe he's in his early 50s, but he was quite a young man, and you know, such a promising literary career ahead of him as well. I also have a copy of Dante's Divine Comedy, which I do dip into from time to time. A couple of books about Nietzsche. Actually, I have 3 books about Friedrich Nietzsche. Again, just because I have a passing interest in all this stuff. Beyond Good and Evil. Leaders of Modern Thought, Nietzsche, a biographical introduction by Janko Lavrin. And I actually really enjoyed that because I felt Lavrin, and sometimes I've found that even with some of Jung's writing is very scholarly and a little bit archaic and difficult, whereas some of the biographers seem to capture the essence. And Oxford World's Classics, The Birth of Tragedy, Friedrich Nietzsche. So there you go, some Nietzsche as well. There's another one there that I thought was a very interesting work, and it's a Penguin classic, and it's a Celtic miscellany. Let me just tell you a little bit about that in terms of publication. Traditions from the Celtic Literatures, Kenneth Hurlstone Jackson, and it's Penguin Books, originally published in 1951. And many reprints. This was the 1986 reprint. And so there are lots and lots of sort of little mini, there are sections, and within the sections then there are lots of mini chapters. Rua in the Land Under the Wave, the creation of Blodeuwedd, which is Welsh, and I'm sure I'm butchering that to hell. The Adventure of Conla. etc., etc. Love. There's a section about love, a section about nature, the Hill of Hoth, the snow, the birchwood bower, Arran, the hermit's hut, the four seasons, storm at sea, etc., etc. A section about hero, tale, and adventure. Let me just read some of the chapter headings from the contents. How Cuchulainn got his name, Cuchulainn and the Charioteer, the killing of Etter Cavol. So a lot of that's about Cuchulainn and the Ulster cycle. Nature, May time, the coming of winter, winter cold, the four seasons, etc., etc. To May and January, the mist, the stars, page 79. Now, there's one I'm immediately interested in. This is something we may read a couple of sections from at some point. Before God, my lass, I must make my way down from the groves of this year's May time, down the goodly slope, through the hillside woods, my fine-haired girl, before I can drink on the hill above and under the birch trees see our bed. And that is a Welsh a poem attributed to, I can't read his name. Anyway, the other one is, again, a sort of a collection of mythology, and it is Bullfinch. I'm sure you'll have heard of Bullfinch's mythology. This is a sort of a really compact paperback version of Bullfinch. I was going to say something else there, wasn't I? Which I picked up in a secondhand bookshop, and it's really neatly presented. Originally published in 1959, and this is a 1967 reprint. And I'm not sure if there's any Celtic mythology in this one, funnily enough. Bullfinch was a native of Boston and professor at Harvard. And I think most of it is... oh, hang on. Yeah. No, there is some. There's Arthurian mythology in it. Beowulf is mentioned as well. The mythical history of England. Arthur, Sir Gawain, Lancelot of the Lake, etc., Lady Guinevere. Okay, so next shelf. What time are we on? We're on 42 minutes. Okay, keep going. Ireland in the medieval world, AD 400 to 1000, and that's by Edel Brannock. Edel Brannock is a substantial scholar of medieval Ireland. She has a wonderful, wonderful, marvelous book about Tara and kingship that I do not have in my library. But I've seen it and referenced it a couple of times, and my good friend Richard Moore has a copy. And I was so impressed by what I've seen inside it that I recently ordered a copy. But because it wasn't available in any bookshop in Ireland, because it was published in 2005, and like Island of the Setting Sun, is not available to buy new. You can only buy secondhand. I'm actually waiting for a copy of it to arrive from Australia. So that'll be... Actually, I'll do a post when it does arrive. I'm hoping it will arrive in the next week or so. Anyway, in the meantime, if you're interested in Irish mythology, it is very difficult to be interested in Irish mythology and not to have, in tandem with that, an interest in medieval Ireland. And that's because the two things are almost inseparable. And most of the myths were written down in the medieval time. The medieval period influences the myths quite a lot. And of course, you will see within the pages, Adamnon's Vita Sancti Columbae, you will see some plates, some photographs of some of the Irish mythical tracts and vellum manuscripts. The Book of Armagh, for instance. Look at that. Compiled apparently in the 9th century. So there you go. And of course, there are sections of all about kingship and royalty and the power of the kings, etc., etc., and the old belief systems. Aimed at the student and general reader, but I can tell you that Edel Brannock is a wonderful scholar. One that I picked up last year, I think, or the year before, 2018, yes, when I was in Kildare, is St. Brigid of Kabir, and that's a relatively new publication, Life, Legend and Cult by Noel Kissan. And of course, remember that when we dealt with St. Brigid, we had 2 episodes about Brigid a while back. Was Brigid, Goddess and Saint in episode 39, and Brigid's Way in episode 40. And we heard in that how there's very little mythology about Brigid the Goddess, but there's a huge amount of lore about Brigid the Saint. And of course, the scholars believe that some of that actually pertains to the goddess, the daughter of the Dagda. That was €24.95 when I bought it. Published by Four Courts Press, if you're interested. And a fairly comprehensive work too, running to about 350 pages. The next one shouldn't need an introduction, and again, a little bit like Rhys and Rhys's Celtic Heritage. This is a book that has been very widely referenced in scholarly publications, books, papers, etc., and articles. And it is Irish Kings and High Kings, and that's by Francis J. Byrne. So if you are interested in kingship and the Hill of Tara, Adele Brannock's work and Francis Byrne's work would be two that you would be absolutely foolish not to have in your collection. Now, Four Courts Press, originally published 1973, and this is the second edition, published in 2001. I'm not sure if it's still available new, but I would say to you, if you have any interest in the kingship of Tara, the concept of high kingship, Niall of the Nine Hostages, the Enail kings and the Ulster kings, the kings of Leinster, Cashel, etc., you cannot be without that. Highly recommended. And it's one that I'll just show you that I want to give you a brief. So just in this 2-page spread alone here, you'll see that I've made underlines and margin notes up and down the side of the page, and that's usually an indication of a book that I'm really enjoying. Another that I think we mentioned before, but I'm going to mention it again, that would be up there definitely with Byrne in terms of indispensable work, but on a different subject, is the Book of the Cailleach by Gearóid Ó Cruailach, which I think is the Irish for Crilly, O'Cruailach. Stories of the wise woman healer. And again, you'll see that throughout the pages I've got lots and lots of stuff underlined and tons of margin notes. I couldn't believe how wonderfully it's a very scholarly work, and the language is quite scholarly, so you may also, as I did, require to have your dictionary app open in front of you for some of the words, unless you're a scholar in English and you're but it's brilliantly written, and I think it actually does something. It brings, instead of it being a dry, sort of sedentary, scholarly, academic work, while it has that academic gravitas, it is poetic in its power as well. This powerful analysis of the wise woman healer from the oral traditions of Ireland's rural communities is unique in its depth and perspective. Stories told and retold, embedded in the texture of culture and community, collected and studied for many decades, are here translated and made available to the general reader for the first time. The figure of the wise woman, the hag, the cailleach, or the red woman are part of an oral tradition which has its roots in pre-Christian Ireland. In the hands of Gearóid Ó Cruailach, these figures are subtly explored to reveal how they offered a complex understanding of the world, of human psychology and its predicaments. The thematic structure of this book brings to the fore universal themes such as death, marriage, childbirth, or healing, and it invites the reader to see the contemporary relevance of the stories for themselves. And I really loved that. Cork University Press, Gearóid Ó Cruailach. Published 2003, reprinted 2006 and 2007. feels that time is really flying. Celtic Mythology by J.A. Mackillop. He was an author of several books, actually, and this is a facsimile reprint of an older book, published in 1996, but originally published in 1918. And among the features are an old drawings of Newgrange before the renovation and excavation, and a plan of Newgrange. And of course, we'll be discussing the renovation and reconstruction of Newgrange in a future episode. So there's no point in discussing it here, because I will not be getting into a discussion about it now, because I'm not really seeing most of the comments. And again, there are small plans of Newgrange. And something I was really interested in was this old photo of the entrance to Newgrange. Again, pre-reconstruction. It actually looks like less like a photo and more like a black and white rendering of a watercolor painting. J.A. Mackillop, Academy Chicago Publishers. Very quickly, a gift from a friend was a book about A.E. George William Russell by William Clyde, with a foreword by Seamus O'Sullivan, and it's a small work about A.E. George William Russell, a hardback, probably originally published about a century ago. First published 1935. Another invaluable work in terms of study and referenced very, very regularly in any work dealing with the archaeology or the history of the Boyne Valley is Sir William Wilde's The Boyne and Blackwater, which was originally published as The Beauties of the Boyne and Blackwater. Published in, I think, at the time of the famine in the 1840s, if I'm not mistaken. I'll find out for you now. Published in 1849. But this is reprinted in 2003 by Kevin Duffy of Headford, County Galway, and is a facsimile reproduction of the original. A fabulous work. William Wilde was the father of poet and playwright Oscar Wilde, a famous novelist. And he was also, I don't know what his exact title was, something like Keeper of Antiquities in the Royal Irish Academy. In other words, all of the old archaeological treasures and bits and pieces that had been found over the years, which later went on to be given to the National Museum when it was founded. And so, for instance, Wilde is among those who would have written about, for instance, the Tara brooch, because at that time it was in the collection. I think he compiled the first and only, if I'm not mistaken, catalogue of all of the items that were in the possession of the Royal Irish Academy. And of course, as I said, many of those went on to become exhibits in our National Museum in Kildare Street. This is one we read a little bit from a while back. Legendary Ireland, Myths and Legends of Ireland by Ethna Massey. And this is a lovely retelling of old myths, 28 of them in total from around the country. And indeed, it is broken up into, segmented into provinces: Leinster, Munster, Connacht and Ulster. So, for instance, in Leinster, Ardee, the fight at the ford; Cooley, the Battle of the Bulls; in Munster, Loch Muskerry, the vision of Angus; Slieve na Mon, the birth of Oisin; Carhaconry, the death of Coorey; Connacht, Dún Aengusa in the Aran Islands; Loch Corrib, Manannán and the Crane Bag; Ulster, the Greenon of Aileach; Tory Island, Loch Ness, etc., etc. Lee Ban, the Mermaid. So there you go. And I know that Jim will be interested in that one. And maybe that's one we'll read in the future. I can't remember how much this was. It's by O'Brien Press, and it's a fairly recent publication, I think 2017. The Celts is a book that I picked up secondhand, and that is originally published in 1975 by Econ Verlag. Sorry, the author is Gerhard Herm. That's a hardback book. I'll be honest, haven't read it. I think I've started to read the first chapter or so, and interesting for a student of the study of the Celts, particularly in relation to archaeology. Now, Tóchar, Walking Ireland's Ancient Pilgrim Paths is a book that was written by Darragh MacDonald, who I happen to be a friend of on Facebook. And it's all about different, pilgrim routeways across Ireland and the history behind them. A wonderful exploration of same. Brian Boru and the Battle of Clontarf is one that I haven't read, so I can't comment on it, by Sean Duffy, published by Gill Books. Yeah, I think I picked this one up secondhand as well. Sean Duffy is Professor of Medieval History at Trinity College Dublin and one of Ireland's foremost medieval historians. And of course, Brian Boru was the first one that sort of could really properly claim the title of High King of all Ireland at the turn of the first and second millennium, around about 1000 AD. Of course, very famous for his battle with the Vikings. So if you're interested in that, maybe I'll get a chance to read it sometime in the future and give it a more comprehensive review. Two books by Robert Graves, one of which you probably have come across in your travels if you've been interested in mythology, is The White Goddess by Robert Graves. And a very interesting study. And again, a little bit of a touch of Gimbutas about this one, I think, First published in 1948, and this is a 1997 reprint. This labyrinthine and extraordinary book, first published 50 years ago, was the outcome of Graves's vast reading and curious research into strange territories of folklore, mythology, religion, and magic. Erudite and impassioned, it is a scholar-poet's quest for the meaning of European myths, a polemic about the relations between man and woman, and also an intensely personal document in which Graves explored the source of his own inspiration, as he believed, all true poetry. I think, isn't this the one that the tree alphabet emerged from? And there's some controversy about that. Some of the scholars think that some of that was a little bit contrived. Anyway, a very interesting work. And there's a chapter in there that's very interesting about the Song of Amergin, among other things. So lots in relation to Irish and Celtic mythology in there. And definitely worth having in your collection. You can probably get a second-hand copy of this because there were so many reprints of it. 1948, 52, 60, 97, 99. That you'll probably find you'll pick up a second-hand copy somewhere on ABE Books or one of those, or on Amazon fairly cheaply. The other one is The Golden Fleece. And again, I picked this up because it was in a second-hand bookshop. Haven't read it, so there you go. And it's not about Irish mythology, so I probably won't get the time to read it in depth anyway, There you go. There's a few people talking about the White Goddess. Another BLS Myths, Gods, Heroes and Saviors, another sort of general work in mythology. A couple that I need to sort of give a mention of that I'm going to take out. A couple that I probably won't mention. Here's one that is nice in terms of it's a look at it's called The Celtic Way of Seeing by Frank Mcgowan. Meditations on the Irish Spirit Wheel. It's a short book, like it's a small book. It only runs to about 130 or 140 pages. Now, Patricia Monaghan was very praiseworthy of it. I've seen a little bit of controversy about Frank on the internet. I think he suffered a little bit of harassment from certain trolls on the internet who thought that his work was too much in the realm of New Age, etc., etc. But I'll tell you, there's a chapter here, actually, a great deal of it deals with the sort of cosmology of this idea of centre and four provinces that we spoke about in the past few episodes. Do you remember we were talking about, or was that last night? The Settling of the Manor of Tara. That was last night. Yeah. And in fact, there's a retelling of the story of the settling of the Manor of Tara in here. An abbreviated telling of the settling of the Manor of Tara. And so it's actually not really that far off the track in terms of, the idea of the cosmology and provinces being associated with certain attributes. Anyway, I enjoyed it. He also has a book called The Mist-Filled Path, which I haven't read, which I believe is a nice work as well, Desiree Riley is watching. Fáilte, Desiree. Harp, Club and Cauldron is one that we've read from. It's a book that I contributed to. A collection, a curated anthology of scholarship, lore, and creativity on the Dagda in Irish tradition. And that's edited by Laura O'Brien and Morpheus Ravenna. It's an eclectic mix of stuff. I mean, there's poetry and there's very, very scholarly articles and contributions by, so for instance, Morgan Daimler, whose name you'll be familiar with, is the author of several articles. Chris Thompson and Isolde O'Vrolcan Carmody, Man of Peaks and Ages, the name of the Dagda, a cauldron of abundance, and some very scholarly stuff. Then stuff relating to practice. So I suppose you could call that, that relates to modern day pagans and how their practice is based on the older traditions. And then in terms of inspiration, there are other contributions. I actually, believe it or not, I haven't read it all, but I've read some of it. It's very, very interesting, but as I said, eclectic mix. Very, very worthwhile having in your collection. And from my point of view, I very much enjoyed the scholarly articles. Can't remember how much it is. And it's Eel and Otter is the public. I don't know if you call it a publisher. Eel and Otter Press 2018. So that's EEL and Otter, is as in the eel, the creature of the water, and otter.com. Most of you who have shared your little libraries seem to have a copy of this. And it's Yeats's Fairy and Folk Tales of Ireland. And to be honest with you, it's so cheap and easy to pick up a copy of this. Why wouldn't you have it in your collection, Originally published when? First published in 1888. Sorry. Yes, this volume contains two separate collections. Fairy and Folk Tales of the Irish Peasantry, first published in 1888, and Irish Fairy Tales, published in 1892. So there you go. And if you're interested at all in the fairies, Eddie Lenihan and Yeats, two that you should have in your collection. You'll probably be able to pick up one of those very cheaply. This one has been absolutely invaluable to me in my work in relation to astronomy, and that is Star Names, Their Lore and Meaning by Richard Hinkley Allen. This is an older book. Can I find out immediately when it was published? So, traditions about all of the constellations and the stars of the sky. First published in 1963. This Dover edition, first published in 63, is an unabridged and corrected republication of the work first published by G.E. Steckert in 1899 under the former title, Their Star Names and Their Meanings. Now, I've read online that some aspects of the study were wrong, or there were some, what you call, errata, but by and large, fascinating study of the section about Orion, as you can imagine, runs to lots and lots and lots of pages. And the wonderful thing about Alan is that he gives you the mythology of the constellation or the star from all around the world. So not just the classical mythology, Egyptian, Near Eastern, European, Chinese, Far Eastern, sometimes Polynesian, South American, Native Indian, which is brilliant. Makes it a very, very... And you should be able to get, again, a copy of this online. without spending a fortune on it. And I think it's been invaluable to me, actually. Grania Whale by Anne Chambers is a book I haven't read. The Life and Times of Grace O'Malley, so I can't comment on it. A Local History of Stamullen by Brendan Matthews, is a historian here in Drogheda. The Celts by Frank Delaney. I think that's actually, I have several copies of some books. That is a study of the Celts have been described as one of the great barbarian peoples of the world. But despite their numerical smallness, they made a major and lasting contribution to Western civilization. That was published in 1986. And is that's about 240 pages. So wouldn't take you long to read it as well. Another interesting history of the Celts. I have two copies of this. That's one. I read some from this, The Celtic Realms by Miles Dillon and Nora Chadwick. Two wonderful scholars, and again, absolutely well worth having in your collection. You could probably, again, pick this up. I paid €10 for this secondhand. I think I have a hardback version of it there somewhere. Early Irish Society, Early Irish History and the Modern Celtic Kingdoms, Celtic Religion and Mythology and the Literature of the Otherworld. So some very valuable stuff in there. And yes, we did indeed read from sections about early Irish society, and that was the one that we did. Hang on, I'll tell you exactly when we did it. Early Irish Society was episode 52, and there's quite a lot about the Brehon laws in there as well. So that's one worth picking up. Who is the publisher? Cardinal, I think, is the name of the publisher. Yeah. Okay, what time are we on? Oh, 106. Okay. Wonder. Well, we'll get the third shelf done maybe. Another one relating to Scottish Gaelic is Alexander McBain's Etymological Dictionary of Scottish Gaelic. The wonderful thing about this is, first of all, there are so many similarities between Scottish Gaelic and Irish Gaeilge. And secondly, in almost every case where he gives the meaning of the word, he also gives the Irish version of it, and in many cases, the Old Irish and the Middle Irish version. So you can find out what way the words were rendered in Old Irish. So this isn't just a Scottish dictionary, really. It's a Scottish Gaelic and Irish Gaeilge dictionary. So just to give you just one example, that's hopefully I can find it rather quickly. If I can. Yeah, Shavach, a hawk. Irish, Shawach. Early Irish, Sebach. Old Irish, Sebok, Sebocc. Which leads me to believe, which is the reason, by the way, I called my novel The Cry of the Sebok rather than The Cry of the Shawach, because the Old Irish was Sebok. And with the two C's on the end, I would be inclined to think that it's not lenited the way Shawach would be. I bought that in 2006. Hippocrene Books, New York, 1998. Not sure if that's available online. If any of you are interested in Irish words, I don't think I paid too much for it. Invaluable book in relation to the study of the myths and the monuments of the Boyne Valley is an old work. I Send My Love Along the Boyne by Elizabeth Hickey, illustrated by Nano Reid. We mentioned this in one or two episodes. This is the book that in which Hickey identified. There's a Zoom meeting going on. You'll probably hear there's quite a lot of fun being had. There's an online quiz that the family are partaking in. So if you hear background noise, don't worry. That's not something we usually have to encounter. They're having great fun out there. In relation to the location of Clechuk, Hickey was the one who actually finally deciphered its location, which is at Rossnaree, overlooking the bend of the Boyne. And previous scholars had placed it at Stackallan, which is much, much further up the river between Slane and Navan. Anyway, that was published, I think, in the 40s or the 50s. No, the 60s. First published in 1966. But this is a special reissuing of the work published by Anya Nicarbra in 2000, which is 20 years ago now. It's a sort of a replica of the original, but with new flaps and an inside cover article about Cygnus and Brunabonia with painting by Richard Moore and words by a certain fella called Anthony Murphy. Would you know who he is? Stories from Tory Island, Dorothy Harrison Thurman. I picked this up because I had been to Tory Island about 4 years ago, and I found it to be an absolutely fascinating place. And this was a lady who had travelled there in 1979, in 1981, and had visited every year and had made so many friends and captured the stories and the folklore of Tory Island. If you can get your hands on a second-hand copy, yeah, by all means. This is a modern reprint of a very old book, Old Stone Monuments by J. Ferguson, 1872, originally published under its title Rude Stone Monuments in all countries, their age and uses. And this is very interesting because it's got sections about, well, among other things, Avebury and Stonehenge, etc. But it's got chapters about Moytura in Ireland, Lough Crew, and it also deals with Brunabonia. And indeed, it was Ferguson who told us that the mound near the river that we call Mound B in the Boyne Valley was actually back then known as the Dogda's Mound. And that affirms to us that one of the many monuments of the Brunabonia complex that was named in the Dinchenicus, that we can actually identify it with one of the modern monuments. Helen Guinan is watching. I mean, the monuments that exist today that are still surviving. I don't mean modern. Helen Guinan is in the house. Your Majesty, very pleased to have you along. I paid €10 for that. And who is the publisher of the modern facsimile reprint? The Lost Library, Glastonbury, England. And the one thing I love about the facsimile reprints, rather than being a typeset in modern type, etc., the facsimile reprints of a lot of the works about Irish mythology also contain a lot of the old Irish in them. And the old drawings, etc., etc. And I'd much prefer that than a modern re-typeset version of it. Okay, we did an entire episode about Edmund Hogan's Onomasticon Gaelicum, so don't need to deal with that here, except to say that if you want that in your collection, it's very expensive. However, there is a PDF version of it. There's an online, or either a PDF or a web-based searchable version of it. So that, you don't need to have the print version. Laura Nahira, otherwise known as the Book of the Dun Cow, and again, this is R.A. Best and Osborne Bergen, and this is entirely in the Irish. I think I've referred to it a couple of times, and this is. Well, Laura Nahira is the earliest of the Middle Age manuscripts that we have. It's 11th century. And what I was very interested in particular in this was the mention, as we discussed in the episode about Dronehenge, was the mention of Enoch in Broga, which I thought was very, very significant because I don't know, I had never... in all of this archaeological texts, papers and books that I've read about Brunabonia, I had never seen anything that suggested that it was an assembly site, an Enoch. And the fact that Enoch in Broga is mentioned in the Book of the Dun Cow, as you may know if you've read my Dronehenge book, is extremely significant. These things aren't cheap, by the way. This is Irish Text Society. No, sorry, Royal Irish Academy, published 1929, reprinted 1970. What did I pay for that? I paid €50 for that. So this is the sort of stuff. It's very valuable, but you'll also pay a price for it. Okay, so there's the hardback version of The Celtic Realms by Miles Dillon and Nora Chadwick that we mentioned earlier. Okay. The next section is the high value section. Early Irish History and Mythology by T.F. O'Rahilly, and you'll have heard me referring to this book. And this book, again, in relation to not just archaeological works, but also mythological works, is very, very widely cited in lots and lots of different works. Published by the Dublin Institute for Advanced Studies, first published 1946 and reprinted 7 times. This is a 2010 reprint. And so a very valuable look. So let me just quickly give you an insight into some of the subjects. On Ptolemy's Geography of Ireland, Fir Vulug, the Gay Bulga and its kin, the Bulgic invasion, the language of the Iran, the Laginian invasion, Tual Techmar, the 5 provinces. So again, if we skip to that, we'll probably find that there's a section there all about Ishnok and the traditions there. And indeed, Tara and Ishnok, yes, I see them mentioned there. Mag Nuadat, the Gaelic invasion, Nile of the 9 hostages, some question of dating in early Irish annals, history or fable, and there's a number of things in there, including Laura Gawala, the genealogies, the Illydian tales, etc. The Traveller of the Heavens, On Anya, the Heavenly Horse, Italo-Celtic tales, etc., etc. Very well worth having in your collection. The only thing to bear in mind is that, again, I think is an expensive work. Can't remember exactly what I paid for it. But again, you should be able to find it on Dublin Institute for Advanced Studies online, and you'll get a price for it there. But a beautiful hardback book, and again, because of its scholarly value, can't really be without it. If you're interested in Irish, the study of, as you know, I'm trying to relearn Irish again. The study of early and old Irish is a quagmire, not helped by the massively scholarly nature of a grammar of Old Irish by Rudolf Thurneisen. And of course, this is a very, very, very highly cited work because Thurneisen was sort of one of the principal scholars of Old Irish. But it is very, very scholarly. And it is so scholarly, it is actually difficult to follow, to be honest with you, you know. And dealing with stems and declensions and lenish and phonology and, you know. In other positions, the original form of lenited stops has undergone various modifications. There is clear evidence that voiced spirants were unvoiced after voiceless consonants. You know, I mean, the terminology. So you really, really, I think, to enjoy this, you really would have to be a scholar of language already. I don't think it is... in cases, it's been handy for me where I've been able to look up words and to see possible meanings and pronunciations, etc. But by and large, it is very heavy going. So for most of you, probably not one that you need to have in your collection. The next one is probably the most mentioned book in the entire series of Live Irish Myths and needs absolutely no introduction, The Dictionary of Celtic Mythology by James Mackillop. Delighted to see that a number of you in the past few weeks have picked up a copy of this. I had a paperback copy which actually belonged to Richard Moore. I had referenced it so heavily that when I was in Glastonbury last year, and I saw this hardback copy with a dust jacket in pristine condition, I couldn't resist purchasing it, and I did, and I gave Richard his much-fingered and it wasn't damaged or anything, but much dulled paperback copy back to him. Absolutely invaluable. If right now you have nothing in your library and you've been interested in Live Irish Myths and Irish mythology, and you're like, I want to start a library, highly recommend it that the first book that you buy is this one. And there are secondhand copies available. I presume it's still available to buy new. I'm not sure if the people who were sharing images of it had bought secondhand or had bought new. Originally published in 1998. And I think the paperback version was published in 1999 or 2000. But definitely, if you have nothing else in your library, start there and you can't go wrong. I mentioned the popular translations of Táin Cúlinge, especially in the first episode. I mentioned Kinsella tonight, but I have another Kinsella there, and I also mentioned Kieran Carson's translation of the Táin. The scholarly one, and the one that, if you were studying Irish mythology in any of our universities, the one that would be recommended to you is Cecile O'Rahilly's translation of Táin Cúlinge. And that, again, is a publication of the School of Celtic Studies, Dublin Institute for Advanced Studies. And that was first published 1976, and this is a 2006 reprint. And like that, there's an entire version of the tale in Irish, and there's an entire translation in English, and a huge amount of notes pertaining to each section and the words, and a comprehensive index. So if you want to study Táin Cúlinge in any sort of a scholarly way, highly recommended is Cecile O'Rahilly's work. And as I said, if you're studying it in university, that's the one they would insist upon. Next is my small but growing collection of works that have been issued or published by the Irish Text Society. And you'll always know the Irish Text Society because they have this insignia on the front, which is usually inlaid in a sort of a gold onto a green hardback book. They're wonderfully produced books, and they feel so lovely in the hand. They're fantastic. So the first of those is Achalo na Sonorach, which is the colloquy of the ancients, which is basically a chat between Caillte and Fionn and St. Patrick, in which a lot of the old myths are related. Now, this is entirely in Irish, so to go with this, you would need to have an English version, unless you're an Irish scholar, in which case, absolute hats off to you. And the version that I recommend is Tales of the Elders of Ireland, a new translation of Achalo na Sonorach by Anne Dooley and Harry Rowe, and that's Oxford World's Classics. Just tell you the publication information about that. Oxford University Press, 1999, and first published as a paperback in that year, reissued 2008. So this is a 2008 reprint. Tales of the Elders of Ireland. I paid €10 and 90 cents, almost €11 for that. New, well worth having. You might necessarily want to have the Irish version. I have found over the past couple of years, I have an increasing want and desire to have either the Irish and the English together, or an Irish version and an English version. So the perfect example of that is the next one, which is Cá Mai Tura, as published by as translated by Elizabeth Gray, published by the Irish Text Society in 1982. A much smaller volume than Achalo na Sonorach, but invaluable. There were two scholarly translations of Cá Mai Tura, the Second Battle of Moytura. One was by Whitley Stokes, and the other is by Gray. And the wonderful thing about this is, as I love this, I love it, is that the Irish is on one side and the English translation on the other. So constantly, if you're looking at a word, you're saying, what is the Irish that's translated from? And you can refer directly across, because each paragraph or each section is numbered, and you can find the corresponding number. In the English and the Irish, you can find the corresponding number and match up the words from which each was translated. Now, if you go onto the Irish Text Society website, some of you will be able to see how much these cost. I can't remember what I paid for some of these, to be honest with you. But quite apart from anything else, they are beautiful. They're so solidly produced. The covers, the hardback and the green, and even the inner cover. I just think they're beautiful publications. And then, of course, I have 3 of the volumes of Laura Gawala Éireann. I have part 2. Again, this is all Irish Text Society, originally published 1939. And this is reprinted 2010. This is the section that deals with the early history of the Gael and Khazer, the arrival of Khazer. So she's the woman who's apparently, according to mythology, related to Noah of Noah's Ark, his granddaughter, who he refused a place on the Ark, and she came to Ireland instead. I have volume 2. I have volume 4, part 4, should I say, and that deals with the Fervulug and the Tua de Danann. And of course, you'll see that I have lots of stickies sticking out of it because it's so highly referenced. Now, okay, I should mention the last volume before I say about online. So just for instance, this is part 5, which is the Milesians and the role of kings, the role of the kings. I paid €60 for that. It's expensive, but it's extremely beautiful and invaluable. If you're sort of starting off on your journey of study and scholarship, you don't need to have those on your bookshelf. I didn't have them for years. They are entirely available online. The entire Laura Gawala is available, I think, on archive.org or on Sacred Text or one of those, as readable publications as PDFs, I think, actually. I'm pretty sure I have the entire Laura Gawala series as PDF. Elizabeth Gray's translation of Cotmaichura is online. Not quite sure about Achalona Shonorach. So you don't necessarily need to have these. I have found it that it's much more convenient for me to have them on the shelf than it is to be reading through PDFs. Remember, because they're facsimile reproductions and they're not retypeset, you can't actually search them. They're not searchable PDFs, so you have to flick through them. And I find it much more comfortable. And because I'm old-fashioned and I like, books, I much prefer to have the published physical version. Next up are a couple of, again, facsimile reprints of very, very valuable work, but work that without these sort of... there's a lot of publishers, if you search ABE Books and Amazon, there's a lot of publishers who seem to have devoted themselves to reprinting out of copyright material. Some of it is extremely valuable. Here's one that I picked, that I got. This was from an Indian company, and they advertise quite a lot on ABE Books. It's Ia Cluna Turin, or the Fate of the Children of Turin. Now we've referred to that, and I think in one of your very early episodes, it may have been episode 2. Episode 2. Yes, the coming of the sun god Lu and the story of the children of Turin. Yeah, so that was episode 2. So this is, as I say, a facsimile reprint of a translation from 1901. Wonderful thing about it is, look, it has the Irish text in the old Irish script, and then it has the English translation, and presented in this beautiful hardback format, and with the again the gold lettering, and even a nice bookmark. I can't remember how much I paid for it, but it wasn't a huge amount. Another one, but the presentation of which is not nearly as good as this beautiful hardback version, is the Gawali Errand, which is actually a different version or a different translation of Laura Gawala, the Book of Invasions. This is a reprint. Again, a facsimile reprint. And this is why I love these, because yet again, the Irish is on the left page and the English translation is on the right-hand page. And there are comprehensive notes on every page that tell you, what each word was, because as with all these old Irish texts, sometimes it's not clear what the word actually means. And so there are notes explaining the possibilities and why a particular one was chosen. So this is basically a reproduction of Laura Gawala, which was written by Michael O'Clery in the 17th century, and is from the Catalogue of Irish Manuscripts in the Royal Irish Academy, manuscript number 23K32. And so headed the Gawali Erend. And so if you look at it, the conquest of Nemed or Neved, the Nevedians, the Nemedians, the conquest of the Firvolug, the conquest of the Tuatha De Danann, etc., and the conquest of the Milesians. And like the multi-volume set from the Irish Text Society, it also begins with the conquest of Kessere at the very beginning. Can't remember what I paid for that, but all I know is that it didn't cost me much. I don't think it cost me €20. It might have cost me 15 or 20 euros. Well worth it. The only drawback to it is that the cover is flimsy and not particularly nice. It's not even nicely designed. However, the work within its covers is extremely valuable. And as I say, it's a facsimile reprint. So very, very, very valuable stuff. I'd much prefer if they did them all like this with the red hardback. It's beautiful, you know. I'm nearly finished. We read from Éanach Tailteann and the Tailteann Games, the origin, history, and ancient associations. And again, this is one of these scholar select modern facsimile reprints, and exactly the same thing all over again. It's an exact reprint of the old book with all of the old typesetting, etc., etc. Again, can't remember how much I paid for it, but I found it online. Was recommended to me by Anthony Woods. Thanks for the recommendation, Anthony. And I picked up this facsimile reprint. And a lot of these are quite cheap. I mean, I consider these works to be invaluable, you know. There's a section here where I just keep my own books. I have a couple of copies of Mythical Ireland, Newgrange, Monument to Immortality, Dronehenge, and a couple of copies of Island of the Setting Sun. I keep them there for reference purposes so that I can, you know, because I do refer back to them. No need for me to go into detail there now. I'll just pull out the last lot, and we'll finish on this. The Boyne Curragh Clive O'Gibney has been building Boyne Curraghs and looking into their history for years and years and years, and eventually published a wonderful book about the Boyne Curraghs, and hopes to and is in the process of building a very, very large seagoing curragh and experimenting with bringing stones in boats to Brú-na-Bóinne, as they might have done in prehistory. And Clive runs the very wonderful Boyne Curragh Centre, which is along the southern shore of the Boyne across the river from Newgrange. A beautiful setting. So if ever, when COVID-19 has been lifted, and if ever you're travelling around Ireland, don't forget to look up Clive Gibney. He also is a wood carver and a wonderful, wonderful artist. So that's an interesting revival of an aspect of Irish history pertaining particularly to the Boyne Curragh. Very worth having in your collection. The Sun Circles of Ireland by Jack Roberts. Jack, who was part of Martin Brennan's team and made significant discoveries at Lough Crew and Douth, etc., in the 1980s. Sort of has had a bit of a revival. He credits me for that because I brought him to the conference where Martin Brennan had come back to Ireland for the first time in 20 years, the Boyne Valley Revision. But Jack is a wonderful artist and scholar in his own right. And this is a very, very sort of a catch-all, but a very nice look at the ancient stone sites of Ireland, stone circles and dolmens and passage tombs, etc., etc., etc. Thanks to Anthony Murphy for starting the ball rolling, he says in the acknowledgements. And the funny thing is, when I was starting to write and research, Martin Brennan and Jack Roberts were inspirations to me. So he started my ball rolling in a way. A legacy of wisdom, the genius, power, and possibility of Ireland's indigenous spiritual heritage by Judith Nyland. Judith would be an occasional watcher of Live Irish Myths, a friend of mine, and this is mainly related to Ireland's relationship with the sacred through quite a lot of it's about the De Danann mythology, druids, shamans, relationship with the earth, etc., etc. A really beautiful work. and Judith is very, very captivated by the spirituality of ancient Ireland, and comes here quite often, usually several times a year. At the moment, obviously, she's stuck in Washington State where she lives. This is published in 2014, and her online presence on her blog is the Stonefire blog. I can't remember offhand the exact address for that. I think this was self-published, so I'd say the best place to get a copy of it is on her own website. Judith Nilan, Nilan, A Legacy of Wisdom. And another book of Judith's is more recent, is A Call to Crone, Weaving Wisdom with Threads of Irish Heritage, Crossing the Threshold. A beautifully produced book, actually. A small book, but beautifully produced and beautifully written. If any of you follow Judith on her blog, you'll know that she has very, very strongly held convictions about the state of the world and humanity at the moment, and that insists that we must return to the wisdom that is contained within our old myths, especially old Irish and Celtic mythology. Two lovely books to have in your collection. Almost finished. An older book, The Valley of Kings, The Boyne, by Henry Boylan, is an exploration of the myths and monuments and the history of the Boyne Valley. I would sort of say this is like a modern version of Wiles' Beauties of the Boyne and Blackwater. A lovely book. I have this a long, long time. Can't remember when it was published, and I'm just trying to find that information for you. First published 1988, and subtitled 5,000 Years of History. I imagine you'll only be able to get that secondhand, but I don't know much more about it. Invoking Ireland by John Moriarty, one of the great works by Moriarty. I'm a big Moriarty fan. He can be a little bit heavy going, but a scholar and a poet and a man who gave up the rat race, very, very well educated man, and gave up the rat race to go and live a simple life in Connemara, originally from Kerry, died about 10 years back, left a vast body of work. This is a brilliant introduction to his work, actually, and one of his most accessible works, Invoking Ireland, Alio Iath na Herand. And of course, that is a line from Auragene's Invocation of Ireland when he landed in the Boyne Estuary. You'd probably pick that up. That cost me €15 in 2009. Which is 11 years ago. So Declan Kyberd, who gave it an endorsement, says, asking Irish people to reconnect with their deepest springs, Moriarty reads the tales in the light of a modern depth psychology of which most Celtic scholars are still quite innocent. His commentaries are like the unleashing of lost ancestral forces, flashing forth again in our moment of current danger. These visionary texts are all a reminder of the life force that beats within us all. Fantastic. Nearly finished. The Sheila na Gigs of Ireland and Britain, Joanne McMahon, and the aforementioned Jack Roberts. Some of you have said that we should do an episode on the Sheila na Gigs, so watch out for that. Forthcoming, I'm not sure exactly when. Originally published 2001. And a wonderful introduction with drawings of every example of Sheila na Gigs that's known. Most of them are in Ireland. There are a few in the UK, and there are a few in France as well. So drawings of every one of them. A lovely exploration of the Sheila na Gigs. And just to prove how prolific Jack Roberts has been in recent years, another very recent publication is Island of the Sheila na Gigs by Jack Roberts. And that was published in 2018 by Bandia Design. That's BANDIA design.com. And that's his own, I think that's his own sort of publishing press, as it were. Another exploration of Sheila's. And I think we read from some of that. The Sacred Mythological Centres of Ireland, an illustrated guide by Jack Roberts, and that was published in 2016. Again, Bandia Publications. A compact work, but for instance, there's just a spread about Douth, plan of Douth, Douth's southern chamber, some of the megalithic art inside there, some of the megalithic art from Nouth, and the Stone of the Seven Sons. So you'll see that it's very well accompanied by lots of Jack's drawings. and a few photographs as well. And I don't think it's an expensive work, but anyway, maybe you look up Jack on his website. We're an hour and 40, so I have to leave it there. And I know that there's probably been loads of comments and questions. I'm sorry that I haven't been able to sort of interact with you because I've been kind of to and fro. We still have... Yeah, I'd say there's maybe 2 more episodes. Yeah, I think there's too much for one. So I think there'll be another 2 library tour episodes. That has been part 2 of the library tour. It has expanded even since the first one. And the lights, of course, have been added lately. And we have plans, because I've completely run out of a shelving space. We have plans for expansion of the shelving space in the near future. So hopefully that'll happen sooner rather than later. I'm very sorry that, as I say, I haven't been able to interact. And I may have missed comments and questions. If you feel that it's important to you, please feel free to send a message. If you're sending me a message on Facebook, folks, please use the Mythical Ireland page to send me the message on. Don't send me a message to my personal Facebook account, because you will likely not be a friend of mine. It's much easier, it's much more convenient for me to keep all the Mythical Ireland stuff on the Mythical Ireland page. So just click into the Mythical Ireland page and click message and message me through there, or send me an email to mythicalireland@gmail.com. Bear in mind that you won't always get a quick answer because sometimes I'm a little bit inundated with correspondence. And it's a great sign that you're interested in all this stuff. If you want more information about any of the books, feel free to drop me a message or drop me an email, and I'll do my best to help you with your inquiry. In the meantime, it's lovely to see over on the Mythical Ireland community. It's been lovely to see the constant expansion of people's own personal libraries. Don't forget that a great deal of this is available online. However, be very careful when you're online that you're not just reading a website that has rehashed stuff and doesn't give the sources. Always be cognizant of where it's coming from. Whose translation is it? What was the scholarly source of it? What was the original manuscript from which it was transcribed? And don't fall for those cheap imitations, as it were. If you need any advice, don't be afraid to reach out and contact me. Slán go fóill, Nadina Galir, Mccourt Galir. Make sure you keep washing your hands. Maintain your social distancing. If you're outside, and especially if you're in public transport or in shopping malls or anything like that where there are people around, it is advisable to wear a face mask. I'm going to join the party here. As you can hear, there's a bit of re-raw August Rulia Bulia in the background. Don't forget to join us again tomorrow evening for episode 74 of Live Irish Myths. In the meantime, Ichawa Kolosov Nadina Galir. Don't forget to check out patreon.com/Mythical Ireland. Patrons of Mythical Ireland are rewarded for their patronage, and you might be interested in becoming one, and there's absolutely no obligation on you to become one. You can still enjoy all of this series and everything else I do without. I'm sorry to the YouTubers as well, anybody whose comments that I missed. Again, I invite you to reach out by email or by message if there's something that you missed or you want more information about any of the books. Good night. Ichawa Kolosov, Slán go fóill. Agus YouTube. Slán. Hello.